action on a global scale. What did you think about this movie for My Hero Academia? Leave a comment down below and I'll get back to you shortly. Whilst you're there, be sure to like, subscribe, click the bell and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do, because YouTube is an increasingly scary place for small content creators. Support your local small content creator today, it will do them a power of good. Now on to the review. But before we get too far into the review itself, I just want to state here and now that this movie does not, I repeat, does not contain any spoilers for things that are yet to happen in the anime. It makes no references to events that are currently happening in the manga or are about to happen in the manga. It is a wholly spoiler-free experience, so you can freely watch this movie without worrying about some kind of event being spoiled for you, some revelation or twist that's already been done in the manga being ruined for you. You can enjoy it. It's safe, folks, it's safe. I'm only just saying this because a few people that I've told that I've seen this movie have been asking me, you know, does it spoil anything? Is it giving anything away? And thankfully it isn't. This is a movie that you can just watch at your leisure without worrying about something happening in the next hypothetical next couple seasons or so. With all that said, let's actually get down to the brass tacks of actually discussing the movie itself in this spoiler-free section of this review. So this is the third movie in the My Hero Academia franchise, and this is a movie whose events were teased in the episode Long Time No See Selkie. You can see my review for that in the little link that's just appeared on your screen right now. In that episode we saw Uraraka and Froppy foiling a drug running operation by a group of criminals who were trying to deliver a mysterious substance to an unknown individual. An individual at the time I thought had something to do with the Metal Liberation Army, but it turns out he doesn't, and he has a group behind him which is far darker and far more horrific than the Metal Liberation Army could ever hope to be. This is an organisation known as Human Rise, a cult obsessed with the Quirk doomsday theory and see quirks as being a sickness that must be eradicated at all costs. And in order to do this, they are going to destroy all Quirk users on the planet using that aforementioned mysterious substance. So our heroes are split up into teams and sent across the world, with Midoriya, Shoto and Bakugo sent with the rest of the Endeavour Agency to Otheron, an island just off the coast of northern Spain. However, things hit a snag when Midoriya and his friends bump into a young lad by Rody Soul who has his own personal problems happening along in the background. Will our heroes save the day, or will things go horribly wrong and we all have a bad time in general? I have to say that this movie does tick a hell of a lot of boxes for me in terms of stuff that I really like about the main show, and seeing them up on the silver screen was really awesome. It had some really great action sequences, it utilises the extended cast rather well, and it's a lot more character driven than I had really expected it to be, and it does some really great things to help build the wider world that this show takes place in. I have to say that I have said in past reviews I'm not a fan of the Quirk Doomsday idea. It's a theory that I really just don't like, as I feel it kind of feels a little bit too nonsensical to me, but that itself is a discussion for a whole other time. So when I was there, sat in my wet clothes after having been caught in the rain, after travelling all the way to go to the nearest cinema showing this, the moment they started talking about the Quirk Doomsday theory, I was just there like, oh god, what have I got myself in for? But thankfully it all works to give us a story which is certainly interesting and certainly thrilling for what it is, though there are a few little issues I have with it which I'll discuss ever so slightly shortly. I have to say that fight sequences that we do see in this movie are truly fantastic to behold. Some of them having a great flow and gymnastic ability to them, this sense of flow and excitement and adrenaline to them, which starts to transition to being increasingly brutal as the movie itself transitions along. And I have to say that my favourite chase sequence is one that we see very early into the movie, one that's been shown in the trailers, but I won't give it away because, you know, this is the spoiler-free section. I don't want to be giving anything away here. I'm trying to keep things as vague as possible. And I have to say that Rody as a character is certainly interesting. Getting a character quite like him is something that I just kind of wish we saw more of in the main show itself. A character who is good, but is a little bit more of an anti-hero, kind of, but not quite in the typical anti-hero kind of way. He's a little bit more of a vigilante without actually being a vigilante. And of course with characters like him, there's always that risk that they're going to feel a little bit more too much like the ally for the weak. You know, like in Doctor Who, where you have that character who gets very close to the Doctor and you think they're going to be a companion, but then they say, alright, goodbye everybody, and you never see them again. And of course we've seen that in other movies in the My Hero Academia franchise, where it feels like, oh, here they are, they're just here to deliver exposition and have the exposition delivered to them, and they don't really have much of a character personality beyond that. And with Rhodey, he does have a character and he does have a personality and has a really neat quirk, which I really didn't expect it to be what it was by the end of it, but it all works out for him. Even if I do feel as though there's something missing from him that I just can't put my thumb down on at this moment. He's great and his story is interesting, but it feels as though there's just a little bit of something missing from him, which again I can't really put my finger down on. If I am to be critical of this movie, I do have to say that whilst the Quirk Doomsday theory is an interesting thing to build a film around, I don't feel it's anywhere near as fully explored as it really needs to be. It's a catalyst for the action, but it's not really given the kind of time to develop it or explore it in quite the same way as I feel as it would have been in the main show itself. Of course, with the main show itself, it would have been something that explored over several episodes, which by that point, again, a full idea of it. In this movie, it's just a background element, and I don't like the fact it is something just so central to our villains' plans and their motivation. It just feels like it's pushed to one side. And speaking of villains' motivation, his motivation for doing all this is something that we don't really learn until later on in the movie. And whilst it is interesting, it's one of those things that you really wish you'd have learned about a little bit earlier on, because it might have helped contextualise things and make them more of a compelling, interesting threat, but they're just in the background and they're just kind of two-dimensional. And there is a part of me that does wish that we saw more of our international cast of heroes, though I'll admit that there's an element that it could have taken away too much from our main course of action, and meant that our characters and main story weren't as developed quite as much as that. And I'll also admit that this is a different strokes for different folks things, because I really like seeing these interesting and cool characters. The opening action sequence, so we get to this movie, we see a whole host of new heroes with some really awesome looking abilities, and I just, wish we saw a little bit more of that, but that's a different kind of flavour thing. As a whole entity, I highly recommend this movie for anyone that is a fan of My Hero Academia. It might not be worthy of going all the way to your local cinema to see, but as soon as it comes out on DVD or Blu-ray or your local streaming service, I highly recommend it. Of course, with that said, it did take me like nearly an hour and a half to end up going out to see this movie, and it cost me quite a bit to do so, so from my point of view, it ain't worth the cost of money, but you know what, it might be a lot cheaper for you if you want to watch it. I give it a recommendation. By all means, go and see this movie if you're a fan of the franchise. Now, let us get on to the spoiler section of this review. We're discussing more focused elements about the story, which are going to be spoilers, so if you don't want this movie spoiled for you, switch the video off now, but before you do so, be sure to give this video a like, subscribe, click the bell, and do all that YouTubey stuff that you want to do, or that YouTube wants you to do. Thank you so very much for being with me, but now let us get into spoilers! Yeah. Okay, so now it's time for the spoiler section of the video, the moment where I talk about a few more elements within the movie itself, which I couldn't talk about in the previous section because it would have spoiled stuff for people who have yet to see it. So I just want to say here and now that final fight sequence that just keeps rolling in the back of my head. A, bloody hell, that was bloody. And B, did we just see Midoriya unlock a new Quirk ability, or was that just him going beyond? That final fight sequence, as with so many of the fight sequences for this movie, was just spectacularly well done. I have to say that of the three fights that were happening at the same time, Shoto's, despite being potentially the more interesting of the three, just kind of disappeared off into the background for a little bit too long for my liking. I think it's just an issue that I have with the movie in general with those three characters in mind, is that all the promotional material, or at least quite a bit of it, was talking about the Three Musketeers and just really bigging up these three characters that would be such a focus within the movie itself, but in the end they're not. Like, yeah, Midoriya is the main focus of it and he spends most of the time on screen, being on screen, but the other two just are absent for so long in the movie. Like, we've all seen the promo material, haven't we? We've seen those posters and those social media things of the Three Musketeers. It was the three of them in new costumes, and behind them would be the Best Genius for Bakugo, and All Might for Midoriya, and Endeavor for Shoto. Just this next generation of heroes and their mentors behind them. And at that moment you think, oh, it's going to be a lot more about these three characters being the heroes, and they're going on this big global adventure. And in the end, they don't. Again, two of them just kind of disappear off into the background for an extended period, and it's just Midoriya and Rhodey, with Rhodey not really feeling quite as much as he really should be. I know that isn't quite a full sentence, but let me explain it. He doesn't really feel quite as much of a character as he really should be. Despite being such a core character and being so essential to much of the drama, it just feels for so much within this movie like there's something missing from him. And I'm not entirely sure what that is. Maybe more backstory about how he was trying to cope with raising his younger siblings was needed more, or maybe the emotional stakes with him needed to be risen up a little bit more, because you know, there's this whole thing about this criminal group wanting to get his guts because he lost all those jewels and such. You know, I'd have thought that would have been a part of the story at least a little bit longer than it was. Like, maybe the criminals are searching for him and it all gets wrapped up by the beginning of the second act, or at least a little bit further into it, so there's a little bit more consequence for that. You know, make it realise just how horrible his life is in this moment, because we don't really get that until the latter half of the movie, and whilst it is very much appreciated, by that point it kind of feels a little bit too late to really elevate him and give him depth when it was really needed earlier on in the movie. Like, with so much of this movie, it feels like they could have done a little bit more to raise everything up a little bit more. And I don't want to blame that whole musical interlude for taking away from that, because, you know, I don't think it would have been in the movie otherwise, but there is a part of me that feels as though there's just so much missing, or at least a little bit missing, from almost every single aspect of this movie. We have a central villain who just feels moustache twirling, who just feels evil for the sake of being evil, in a program where we don't really have villains who are like that. Almost all our villains in this program have some form of motivation behind them, something that makes them tick and justify their actions for doing it, and with Blue Man Group, as I said in the non-spoiler section, we only really learn as to why he's the way that he is, you know, very late into the proceedings of the movie. Because he wasn't hugged enough as a child, people didn't pat him on the back, he wasn't quite as connected with other people, and yet somehow he ends up finding himself at the centre of this global doomsday cult. A cult at the end of the day doesn't really get defeated, and if anything, they just got pushed to the background, but being a movie villain thing, we're probably never going to see them again in the main series. But of course, me just saying that ends up inviting debates around what is canon and what isn't canon as far as the movies themselves is concerned, which is something that's going to be hotly debated given recent events and recent character introductions within the manga, but that itself is spoilers that I don't want to get into at all right now. I have to say though that I am appreciative of the fact that Rhodey was the one that ultimately saved the day in the end, or rather his little soul projection bird was the one that saved the day, because I worried that had it not been for that, his character would have been sorely missing really much of an arc. I do feel as though it would have felt a little bit better had we spent a little bit more time to just really get our hands dirty and really develop this character and get to understand him better. You know, maybe his character was a little bit more of a slacker, someone that was actively avoiding responsibility and now he's making this big sacrifice, or maybe the whole thing about him being the sole breadwinner and guardian to his younger siblings was built up a little bit more, so it's just a case of, no, Rhodey, you can't do this, because if you die, then that means then your siblings are going to be without anyone to protect them. You can't do this. Oh God, if only someone was here to save the day. No, Rhodey, he has to do it because there is no alternative. You know, if they'd had that little bit of an internal conflict within us when that was happening, then I feel that would have added something extra to that scene, because just the way that it's all set up, it just feels like a moment where I should be there trying to hold back the tears, like, I'm not crying, I'm just still wet from getting caught in the rain, that's all that's happening with me. You know, I just wanted to be in that mood, I just wanted to be really moved by that, but it feels as though it was just lacking that extra bit, that extra oomph that really got to us, because, you know, the action sequences, they ain't lacking in oomph, they ain't lacking in impact. It's just some of the smaller character moments that just felt as though they were lacking that little extra bit, and there were just some interactions that just felt terribly cliched, like the bit where Rhodey decides, oh, he's going to throw his lot in with the villains and try and give them the briefcase. I knew everyone saw that coming like a mile off, and I really hated that. I think that if you were to do something like that, then it needed to tie into his core personality and his storyline a little bit more, like, you know, maybe he catches a thing on TV where, oh, we're offering a reward of 2 million euros if you hand in this mysterious briefcase. You know, just incentivize it a little bit more, so there's a little bit more temptation there, rather than it just being a case of, I want to get rid of this because I just want to go home and watch Emmerdale Farm, as seemingly was the case. You know, it needed a little bit extra there. With so much of this movie, it just felt as though it needed that little bit extra. in the end, again, I do love this movie, and I highly recommend it to anyone that's a fan of My Hero Academia. It's a little bit harder of a sell for people that aren't really familiar with this show, because I think that the first movie was a better balance for people that weren't so familiar with this show, but I feel that in the end, yeah, it was a really fun ride for what it was. I do feel as though it was missing a little bit of something. I'm not going to blame the musical sequence for taking time away, because, you know, that just feels a little bit too nitpicky for my liking. But again, it just feels as though a little bit of something else was needed. And there's just one thing, just one fatal flaw, though, with this movie, which is the fact that why was Aoyama, the French kid, why didn't he go to France? Why was he not in France? Where was he in all this? He should have gone to Paris. He should have gone to Paris, but he didn't go there. And plus, there's a whole contingent of characters that just didn't go anywhere, that were just still at home. They were still in Japan in the pyjamas. What's up with that? You could have had a whole other world, a whole other country explored by them. You know? Am I the only one that would like to see that? No. Alright then, well, whatever. I enjoyed the movie. We're running short on time, and I just want to say thank you for listening, thank you for watching. This movie does get my thumbs up. For anyone that is a fan of the series, watch it at your first available opportunity to do so. Ideally the cheapest way possible. You know, maybe don't do what I did and travel for an hour on the train and then half an hour by foot and then spending nearly 30 quid to watch the thing. It ain't worth it. It ain't worth that money. It's worth watching, but it ain't worth that money. Anyway, thank you all for watching. Thank you all so very much. Be sure to go down to the comments and let me tell you tell me what you thought of this movie. Let me know what you thought about this movie. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTube stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Thank you all for watching, and see you next time. Goodbye! Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!